The month of June has come and gone, and with that, it's time for another recount of what I've been up to for the past month. Gonna be talking about a lot of games and anime specifically today, but some other stuff as well. A reminder that the goal for 2021 here on YouTube is to reach 5,000 subscribers, and with your help, I know we can do it. So leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, it's greatly appreciated. If this is your first time watching a video in this series, these aren't heavy on the editing, so sit back, relax, and put this in the background while you do something else. With that out the way, let's recount what I've been up to in June 2021. June was of course the month of E3, so let's start with that. I did a massive amount of videos on E3 during last month, so I'm not going to go into too many specifics here, but rather I want to focus on what E3 means to me and why it's my favorite time of the year. It's obviously no secret I'm passionate about gaming, but that passion extends to more than just playing games. I love learning about the history of gaming, the work that goes into making them, and I love just being excited hearing about all the new games coming out in the future. Since the early 2000s, E3 has been like a second Christmas for me, oftentimes even more exciting than Christmas itself. The industry coming together to talk about what the future of gaming holds, the surprise reveals, the sometimes clever or often embarrassing presentations, I love it all. It's why E3 being gone last year because of the pandemic was such a blow to me, and why I was so ecstatic to see it return this year. Now sadly, this year's E3 was overall underwhelming, which is a shame, but there were some major highlights still, like the reveal of Halo Infinite's multiplayer mode, and of course Nintendo's entire Direct that single-handedly stole the entire show. Those moments are why I love E3, and even if there was a lot of underwhelming things to go with it, those high moments of genuine excitement and hype more than made up for the event for me. Since we're already talking about games, let's go over the major stuff I played last month, the first being the Mass Effect Legendary Edition Collection. It's all 3 games of the trilogy in one, with all the DLC included, redone textures, and redone in 4K. I guess I should explain my history with Mass Effect actually, since I actually never played the original until now. It was Christmas one year and my friend Travis was showing me his brand new game he got called Mass Effect 2. At first I didn't think much of it, but to my gain, Travis just happened to forget his copy of Mass Effect 2 with him when he left, so I loaded it up because why not? And though it takes place right after the events of the original and I knew nothing about these characters or the world, I kept playing. And it was a couple hours in, around the time you recruit Garrus on Omega, that something just clicked. The combat, the world, the premise, I just couldn't put it down. And so I played and played until completion, and I was a fan. And then when Mass Effect 3 came out, I played and loved that as well. Now we fast forward to 2021, and I got my chance to finally play the original. And all I can say is that it's good. It's the weakest of the 3 games, but it's still a great BioWare RPG in its own right. And I'm glad I got to go through it and make decisions that would affect my playthroughs of 2 and 3. And I'm on Mass Effect 2 now as of this recording, and this is one of those great instances of me loving something in my memory, revisiting it, and being surprised that it's even better than I remember. Mass Effect 2 is a phenomenal must-play game that keeps you hooked from beginning to end, and I can see myself sinking 100 hours into it easily with all its character missions, the scannable worlds, and just the overall abundance of good, genuinely interesting content it has. Just talking about it now makes me want to go back to it immediately. Can't wait to beat it and then get lost in 3 as well. The next game I spent quite a bit of time playing in June was Chivalry 2. I actually didn't know this game existed until the Summer Games Fest, and it looked interesting, so I decided to try it. I never expected to be addicted to it in the way I was for days on end though. You control a knight or a bowman or other medieval classes and fight in a massive battle against other players. With sometimes over 60 people fighting at once, it gets very hectic. There's often various objectives like pushing an objective or scaling a wall and raiding a castle or stealing gold. It's never dull and the combat is very simple to pick up but hard to master. You can swing, stab, or slash at varying degrees of intensity. You can even change the momentum of your attacks on the fly. And there's blocking, parrying, shield breaking, and more that makes every fight you get into different from the last. It's a lot of genuine fun and you can even play with a group of friends. So if any of you own the game or are interested, let me know and we can definitely play sometime. Next thing I played was one of the biggest releases of the year for the JRPG community, and that's Scarlet Nexus. This game had a lot of hype before its release, and I'll be honest with you, I really didn't pay attention to it until reviews dropped a couple days before release. But it seemed interesting enough, so I picked it up on a whim, and honestly my thoughts on it are mixed, though I see why some are heavily praising it. The one thing no one can deny is that this game is stunning visually. When played in 4K 60 frames per second, is easily the best looking JRPG I've ever laid eyes on. It's possibly the best looking one ever made, and I don't say that lightly. But the game needs more than visuals to stand on its own, and this is sadly where Scarlet Nexus lost me. I got about halfway into the story and everything from the characters to battles to the story itself just weren't doing it for me. The setting is cool, taking place in a futuristic cyberpunk setting where people can have a random superpower like telekinesis or hyperspeed. This plays into the combat as well, since you yourself have the ability of telekinesis and you can borrow the powers of your teammates temporarily. And while this sounds fun on paper, I stopped enjoying combat a few hours in. Despite its depth, it's pretty repetitive and you fight the same enemy types too often, who have very basic attack patterns. Not to mention, I just find the playstyle of both main characters uninteresting. And speaking of characters, I couldn't get attached to any of them, no matter how dire the situation was or how much the game wanted me to care. It's certainly not a bad game, but it just wasn't a game that I could keep interest in. The last game I spent time on in June was something I played twice before, and that's Shin Megami Tensei 4. With all the hype around SMT5, I felt the itch to revisit 4, and honestly, it's one of those games that the older I get, the more I appreciate everything it's set out to do. The game is a borderline masterpiece in setting the tone with its music and every scenario you find yourself in, and it's still in my opinion the most welcoming entry in the mainline SMT series for newcomers. I love how the game layers modern technology like smartphones and apps on top of this supposed medieval European country, and does it in a way that makes you think from the get-go something isn't right here. And when you get far enough, you do realize that something wasn't right and that it's worse than you imagine. And the entire perception you have of not just the areas you've been to, but the entire world you're inhabiting gets turned on its head. It's done so well, and I hope 5's world building is half as good. Alright, so that covers all the main games I played in June. Now let's move on to anime and manga. And I'll start with Back Arrow. Back Arrow is a newer mecha anime from the director of Code Geass, though it's often more similar to his previous work, Gun X Sword. Set in the world surrounded by a wall that everyone worships and reveres, a young man with amnesia suddenly crashes down one day, claiming to be from beyond the wall and wants to go back beyond it. Sadly, in this world, even wanting to go beyond the wall is a no-no, so he gets caught up in a battle between nations while trying to find a way back beyond the world wall. Honestly, there isn't much particularly amazing about Back Arrow, but there's nothing bad about it either. It's just a good show in pretty much every regard, and honestly, I was fine with that. A lot of you know that it's hard for me to get into most modern anime, but I was glad I was able to get into this one. Amazing or no, it's a good watch, and the mystery of what's behind the world wall and then finding out what was behind it were more than enough to keep me watching. If you're in the mood for a solid mecha show, check it out. So let's switch over to the main manga I was obsessed with in June, Dr. Stone. Now, I actually read a little bit of Dr. Stone a couple years back before the anime started, but out of nowhere I just had the sudden itch to go back into it, and now I'm over 100 chapters in. I'm so glad I did too, because even on rough days, reading a chapter or two of Dr. Stone before bed put me in a good mood, and I had a genuine smile on my face so often while reading. Sankyu is the perfect example of someone being a badass with only their mind as their main weapon, and the entire Kingdom of Science has become one of my favorite feel-good groups possibly ever. I love their dynamic with each other and how they compensate for each other's weaknesses. And you actually learn things reading Dr. Stone, like genuinely learning the science of and how much hard work goes into making the things we use on a daily basis and take for granted. It's such a unique series, and it may go down as a personal favorite of mine for a long time. Alright, so the biggest piece of anime I watched last month was undoubtedly Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway. Based on the novel Hathaway's Flash, it's now a contender for one of my favorite Gundam works. I hope I can do a good job of even moderately conveying how amazing this movie was. The perfect way to enjoy this movie is to turn off the lights, get the biggest screen you have, make sure you're watching it at its highest resolution, and make sure there's no outside noise or interference. Just you in the movie in perfect silence so you can enjoy the phenomenal sound design and really take in all the amazing subtext of conversations. The movie follows Hathaway Noah and takes place after the events of Char's counterattack, though they did an amazing job of making it virtually standalone. Hathaway is the world's most feared terrorist, going by the name Mafty, and he and his group have been taking out the bull-headed world leaders of the Earth Federation. But maybe the biggest theme of this movie is the duality of Hathaway as a person. Since on the surface, the person you're following is just a polite and earnest young man, it almost makes you wonder at times if he really is Mafty, the man the Earth Federation fears more than anyone. And the most powerful moments of this movie are when it's at its most quiet, with Hathaway just laying on a bed alone at night, thinking about his decisions, or Hathaway talking to a taxi driver and silently realizing how even the people who's trying to help the most with his actions may view his plans as impractical and bothersome. This movie left me hanging on every word of dialogue, and I cannot wait to see the next 2 parts in the years to come. It's a must watch. So what I want to end this video with is just talking about where I'm at mentally with the state of the channel and how June was one of the best months we've ever had. In June, I uploaded 15 videos, setting a new channel record, I'm sure, but maybe even more importantly, it made me feel like this is really something I can do. It's one thing to pump out a lot of videos, but it's another thing when people like those videos and flock to the channel. I do content creation because it's a passion of mine, but it does help give me motivation to keep going when I see you guys enjoying what I do. It makes me happy when I see you guys have tried a series that you're now passionate about because of a recommendation of mine or how a video might turn your day around. It's a great feeling and one I don't take for granted. I'm hoping July will be just as successful and fun for you and I, and hopefully I'll continue to get opportunities like getting to review Disguise 6 Day 1 for you guys, which was awesome to do by the way. And I'm just feeling confident and proud in what we're doing here in our small corner of the internet, so let's keep it up. Thanks for sticking with me until the end of this one, guys. If you've done anything interesting or exciting in June, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And here's hoping July is great for all of us. I'll see you later.